I'll be taking one of the sessions today. We'll be having three topics here. Moreover, few important things. Like I know the next POCs will be taking over anyways. They will be giving over basic information that would require to go and understand this particular workshop or the workshops in general. But just remember a few things that just because the fact that we are uploading this, we are taking the extra burden of recording these workshops and uploading them on YouTube. That doesn't mean that you will be getting that amount of slack that you can actually go and miss few workshops, even if you are free or even if you are not that busy. Understand what you actually get by attending this live workshops is like we are always trying to be we are trying to communicate with you because we understand this in itself is extremely nuanced, and the more you communicate, the more you ask, the more you actually have end-to-end communication with us, it would be really beneficial for you to actually have a good get. Let me give you a few examples of how Debarya, Sanjeev, Aditya, Udichi, these are people like I remember them from like teaching from day one. They used to be extremely active. They used to ask questions. They used to probably get few scoldings from my side because I used to be like, "How you so dumb?" But don't worry, I said that they won't be saying that anymore for you. But yeah, that's how they learned, and this communication or at least this questions would actually go and help you all to learn better about this particular. I would say this is a sport. This is a fun sport. One more final, I guess, a huge shout outs to Debarya. He's doing round two of it, and he's still recording this particular workshop. So yeah, that's a great thing. With that, yeah, Ananya, it's all yours. I'll come in and when it's my time.
Okay. Hi everyone, this is workshop 3. Today we'll be covering contextualization and characterization and actor and stakeholder analysis, and finally introduction to APD adjudication. This workshop is especially important because from the first two topics, you'll be able to understand how you're going to build your cases more successfully and how you're going to have a much more fruitful debate than usual. These are very nuanced topics, so please be sure to pay a lot of attention. And the people who will be explaining this to you are extremely qualified. So make sure you listen to them correctly. Make sure you go through the recording if you have any questions, or shoot any questions in the end if you have any doubts, because I completely understand this is a very nuanced topic to grasp in one go. So yeah, with that, I would like to invite Udichi and Sanskriti for the first topic. Thank you. Also, Niharika, are you here? Okay, no worries.
Uh, I don't think so. Niharika is here. Ask someone else to share the screen, please.
No, no, I'll share the screen. It's fine. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Great. Udichi and Sanskriti, are you here?
Yep, we're here.
All right, please take over.
Yeah, just give us a few seconds. Hello everyone, Sanskriti this side. So we'll be talking about contextualization and characterization in a very uh,
Sanskriti, you're muted.
Yeah, Nanya, just give us a second. She's just trying to find it. Just give us a second, yeah. So sorry.
Okay, so contextualization and characterization, right? So, why are we talking about this in the very first place? So, when we generally look at debates, okay, we think of a lot of arguments, right? And points to make. We think it's about how many effective arguments you are able to bring into a round. But that's not necessarily the only thing you need to focus to to ensure you're doing good in a debate round. It's something that comes from the understanding of the characterization and contextualization looks like, right? Now, contextualization is basically a time, place, origin setup that helps you explain why a certain thing exists in the very first place. Now, every time when you make an argument and every time you try to explain the impacts of those argument, you are more reliant on the sort of contextualization and characterization you give in the very first place, right? Now, the difference between characterization and contextualization first. So first of all, both of them are very different, but still very, very connected, right? Characterization is about who the actors are, what kind of people or institutions they are, what power they have, or perhaps what their intentions are, right? And contextualization on the other side is about what situation they are in, the background, constraints, pressure, and circumstances that shape their decision. For example, suppose the debate is about a government, banning plastic bags. Now, the characterization is about the contextualization will look like. But what the contextualization will look like, you explain that the ban is happening during a severe pollution crisis where plastic waste is choking, drains are harming animals, and how, softer measures are failing miserably. So, this is the difference between characterization and contextualization, but still it's very connected for to work in debates. Now, why both of them are equally important? First of all, it gives you a more persuasive base. Okay, it shapes how the judge and the audience pursue your debate. It helps set a perspective. It helps you frame things in a manner which is way, way better than the arguments your opposition might present, right? Second of all, narrative control. Now, what narrative control looks like? Okay, it allows you to frame the debate on your terms. Narrative control means showing how exactly the debate is told. It avoids letting the other side paint your side as, perhaps careless or maybe very extreme or selfish. It allows the viewers to look at the debate on your particular terms. Second of all, it prevents the opposition from defining the context in a way that might make your actions look wrong or might make your case look very idealistic, and helps the judge to see your side as more realistic. Enhance Third of all, it helps in enhancing argument relevance. Now, arguments become more impactful when they are placed in a very clear context, right? And it involves well defined characters because it just becomes easier for the judge to understand. When the situation is clearly explained and the judge knows what is happening and why it matters, when the actors are clearly defined who they are and whatever power they hold, who is getting affected, the judge can easily see the importance and the impact. Third of all, it exposes weaknesses. Okay, it helps you identify what the opposition is perhaps assuming without proofs, without proper explanation, and show why those assumptions are unrealistic or incomplete, right? It making their case look weaker and your case more credible. A very important point to note, the team that better establishes the context and characterizes the key elements has more significant advantages, right? So understand, it's very important for you to establish the context and characterize the key elements in a very detailed way, as it helps your further speakers to elaborate more on it and make uh, you know more clear arguments. Now, what contextualization looks like? Um, it means setting a scene in terms of where and under what circumstances of the debate. Okay, it provides a necessary background for understanding the motion. Okay, context means setting an environment in which a debate exists, which means that context which means what context surrounds the motion, or perhaps what are the added elements that surrounds the motion, things that are engaging with the system. Now, if you leave out these things or contexts which are relevant to the motion, it's simply bad for your case in general, right? Contextualization, in simple words, is explaining the situation or background around an actor or an event, right? It's about showing why something is happening, what limits and pressure already exist, and what factors influence the decisions. Okay, so now what are the layers of context, right? And why these layers are important, first of all? Because these layers are important because they explain why certain decisions or actions are just being taken, right? Now, going on with the layers of these contexts, first being historical. Now, it explains how some past events still shape the present scenarios, right? Second of all, being social cultural, explains how societal norms, values, public opinions still influence a lot of opinions and a lot of things in today's scenario. Third of all, being economic, how it explains more about financial conditions, where market is focusing, or perhaps the resources distribution. Fourth, being political, it focuses more on the government system, right? How the power dynamics looks like, how international relations look like. So these layers help you better in framing your context in general. Now, why is it very crucial in the very first place, right? First point being relevance. Now, what it does, it ensures your arguments are more applicable to the specific scenario of the debate. Whatever arguments that you're making, whatever points you're making, it's crucial because it will make those arguments look more more relatable, more realistic, more you know applicable to whatever debate scenario you are trying to paint, right? Second of all, being likelihood, it makes your scenarios and impacts more believable, more realistic in the real world. It's easier for the ads and the audience to buy into it if there are just it's just if it's more realistic, if it's more believable. If there is a less likelihood of something being happening, it's simply there is just very less chances of that being credited. Third of all, being it avoids misinterpretation, right? Very, very valid point. It prevents arguments from being biased or being based on a very false premises. Also, it helps you explaining arguments that you want to go ahead and prove, okay, on a very greater scale other than other arguments. Now understand that at the end of the day you still have 7 minutes, right? You cannot talk about on every argument and explain everything. You just cannot. So because sometimes you don't want to prove a lot of arguments, so perhaps you don't have you don't want to go to that depth, or you don't have enough time. So you have to be picky and choose the right arguments to make your case look better. Now, how to establish these contexts more effectively, right? You have to be again, we do not need a lot of huge amount of explanation about everything, but to prove relevant amount of information to make your case look more relevant. Okay, if we don't put necessary reasons for a particular argument to exist, there is a possibility that the argument may still seem like a assertion, okay, or perhaps seem more very extreme, perhaps very vague, or it will look like an assumption, and it's just extremely bad for your further speeches as well, because again, your further speeches are completely based on these contextualizations. So if you go ahead and not be specific, or perhaps not be concise, it's just bad for your further speeches to be to have a very clear base from the very beginning. Second of all, these contextualization usually happens in the very early it comes early in the speeches, right? Often in the introduction of the very first speaker. So contextualization is basically the burden of the first speaker. Third of all, being the sources. Okay, these can be the examples of current events or perhaps reputed newses which can easily be assumed to be important into the will, and be known to a particular individual. Again, right, these sources can be perhaps be media coverage, or perhaps some general knowledge, or current news, which is perhaps very which is perhaps important for a individual, a average voter to know. That's all from my end. Characterization will be covered by Udichi.
Okay, hopefully I'm audible, and just give me like 2 seconds. Yeah, I'll be starting in, yeah, 2 seconds. Cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Udichi, and I'll be talking about characterization. But just before I start, just to ensure that you guys are actually, paying attention and you're not asleep and all, I would just like a raise of hands from all of you. Just raise your hands. Because guys, look, Sanskriti is the POC. Sanskriti is the person who will be taking your attendance. So you have to watch out, right? You all better be aware. Cool. Who all have not raised hands yet? Mm, Okay, I think, yeah, a lot of people have raised hands. A lot of people haven't too. Well, we are taking attendance, the raised hand will be considered for attendance. I'm not kidding. Cool. Great. Awesome, awesome. Thank you all. You can just put down your hands. Yeah, yeah, Sanskriti to take a screenshot. Cool, done. Awesome. Yeah, okay. I just let's just get, yeah. You guys can put down the hands now. And I mean, before like I start, right? I mean, I hope you understood contextualization very well and framework very well, because characterization is something that depends very heavily on contextualization. You cannot have a mismatch in between them, because then, because somehow then it will ensure that now, like basically you will lose, because for let me just, okay, I'll just explain Karak first before I tell you why mismatch is so bad, right? So first of all, talking about the fact like what exactly characterization is, right? It basically means that you go ahead and define what the key elements of the debate are, what is the most important factor of a debate, and you go ahead and describe what they are. Again, one way to go about it is like describing the five W's: what, why, when, where, how. And yeah, the one H, how. And the other way is usually, if you guys, again, I said it in the previous session as well. If you just go ahead and, place the motion, and you think about the key players here, the key actors here, the key stakeholders who are involved, and you think about how they feel, what they go through, but also you talk about how those actors inherently work, what problems they are facing, what that problem looks like, what, whatever policy or solution that you're proposing looks like, then that is what characterization is, right? So again, actor analysis is there, especially, we don't go ahead and, characterize a lot on state actors, for example, institutions, etc. First of all, next slide, please, Ananya. Yeah, cool. So again, actors can be, state or non-state individual actors. So, state actors are usually look like government and your corporations and your large institutions, etc. So usually you don't go ahead and characterize exactly what a government looks like, right? Because these are facts that are already established. I mean, it doesn't make sense if you go ahead and talk about what a democracy government look like, or what a democratic government or how it caters to the citizens, etc., looks like, because it's an already established fact. And again, you do have 7 minutes of speech, right? So talking about something that is already that the ad is already well aware of is a waste of time, right? So you don't, if there is a certain key fact that you get to know about that certain corporation or that certain institution or government through the info slide that is provided to you, or something, or a key characterization that you must mention because of the framework that you have laid, then you go ahead and say that, right? But usually characterization revolves more around the non-state individual actors, which are, you talk about their personalities, you talk about their lifestyles, you talk about their experiences, how they grew up, what they have felt, and what they have felt and what exactly they have experienced in their lives. To you talk about their problems and their achievements, etc., etc., right? I'll be talking about those later. So yeah, next slide please. Cool. So, yeah, characterization of actors. You need to understand that usually characterizations is primarily based on the stakeholders that are involved, right? What are actors basically? Actors are the people, whatever motion you have. For example, this house would support the feminist movement, right? So, what does feminist like? The motion, you need to be very relevant to the motion when you go ahead and talk about certain actors that are involved or certain stakeholders that are involved. You need to ensure that you don't talk about some sort of government or some sort of institution unless they're very relevant to the debate. So if you're talking about the feminist motion, you usually go around and talk about how the women are getting benefited, how the women are getting impacted, maybe in a bad way, in a good way, according to the house that you are in, right? So, and and then it's not only that, it's this is a very superficial layer of characterization about what feminist movement is inherently, what their goal is, what they want to achieve, but also how they have impacted. You go around, as Sanskriti talked about, right? You go about historical patterns of where the feminist movement was back then and where it is now. It also depends on the motion burdens that you have. For example, again, this house would support. So when you go ahead and say TSW, you need to propose some sort of a policy. But since it's inherently stated that you are just supporting the feminist movement, you can go ahead and talk about how you would support it, how you would implement that supporting of the feminist movement, right? So don't stay on a very superficial level of characterization when you just talk about how this is and how that is. You need to go in depth because when you go in depth, characterization is so important because that is inherently what helps you push in-depth arguments, which helps the ads make comparative analysis as to which argument weighs more, which argument they should consider more important, which argument that severely impacts more, right? Your impacting and your weighing inherently comes from the sort of characterization you provide, which is why it's so important, right? So what does characterization of actors look like? It looks like incentives, agency, urgency, and vulnerabilities, right? But before that, as I told you already, the most important thing is when you go in depth and talk about how they feel when they are placed in whichever circumstance the debate provides to you, in whichever situation they are in, how they have gone through whichever process, transformative process they're supposed to be going through, how they feel regarding that situation, what is the patterns that have already been noticed before, how they look at that, but how also, they are inherently, you talk about their nature. For example, if I talk about a minority, I talk about a minority racial community, right? So you go ahead and talk about how those minority racial people, like what the community looks like, but you also talk about how they have been prejudiced on the way they look, on the way they live, how simply because of the fact that, oh, they do not, majority racial community and the minorities one, they do not face the same lifestyle, they have not lived together, which means they do not have the same values inherently, they might not even have the same religion, or they might live differently, they might have different lifestyles. It inherently leads to why the majority people essentially discriminate against the minorities, right? So you need to paint about how the minority looks like, which is why this essential discrimination arises, which is then later on you push forward your arguments and impacting, right? So what are like incentives, right? Incentives is basically what is the motivation, what is the driving force behind whatever is happening, what is the driving force of the actor, what is the driving force of whichever stakeholder is involved. For example, it could perhaps be, greed. It could perhaps be greed for power, or greed of money, or it could be for, again, profit. it could be because of a certain ideology they have, either it be religion, either it be conservative, or just a certain social ideology they have due to the current society they live in, right? So that is what incentive is. What is agency? Agency is basically their capability, right? When you talk about the fact that how they can gain access to certain resources, or how much resources they actually have to go around and work it. For example, different actors have different agency, right? A a very famous politician might have the agency, or might have the resources to go ahead and perhaps get their child admitted in a college in a very different way, right? But for a middle class person, it's not exactly that, because a politician has a lot of connections. So that is the agency. That are the resources they have, the influence they have. But whereas for a middle class person, they have to go ahead and go into the legal way, because if they are caught, their entire life is ruined, right? Because now they get be blacklisted and etc etc. Now the society doesn't like them anymore because they caught I don't know, they just caught somehow getting their child in an unfair means into the college institution, right? So that is what agency is. It's different for every actor. That you talk about limitations of every actor that is there, right? What is urgency? What is urgency, right? Urgency simply means that you talk about, like, urgency is again another word for incentive, because you have to talk about the fact that why you need that certain power so desperately, why you need that certain motion, that certain solution so desperately to happen in the first place, right? And vulnerabilities are the weak areas, the places where the people could get striked at, the spots where the people could get harmed at, right? Social constructs that already exist in the status quo or in the world that you have built in, which is why this certain community or this certain person faces prejudice or stereotype in a certain way, which heavily harms or impacts them, right? Vulnerability is very important, because then you go ahead and push forward your solution, right? Next slide, please. Ananya, could we have, yeah, cool, thank you. Then we talk about problem statements and their characterization, because again, that understand that as the first speaker or as the second speaker, whichever you are, you go ahead and you have to lay what is there on the table for the ads to grasp at that. You cannot let the ads make any assumptions or any guesses of their own. So now you have to characterize the problem that exists in the motion, right? Or due to the motion. For example, you talk about scope. What exactly scope is? You talk about the fact that how in depth like the problem goes. Either it's maybe political, on a political scale, on an economical scale, on a historical scale, right? Like how basically deep it goes. Then you talk about the fact, you talk about scale, about how how heavily it impacts the society in general. uh, you talk about the fact of how, like, how maybe the scale is country based, maybe the scale is something that is uh maybe it's restricted to a city, it's restricted to a certain community. That's what scale is. And then how that scale heavily impacts the stakeholder that is involved. You talk about the urgency. Now understand that of course urgency exists for the stakeholder, but it exists for the problem as well, right? Why is it so urgent to solve that problem? Why what are the impacts that it's causing so heavily, and what are the damages that it's causing that we urgently need to solve it? And why perhaps you as the gov side can prove it more as compared to the opposition side, or vice versa, right? And then you talk about the root causes. Understand, talking about the root causes is so important, because now you go ahead and you know the root causes is the very thing that you go ahead and try to solve through your proposed solution or through your proposed policy, right? Because you understand that even if whatever you're proposing is perhaps a bad model, it's not the best solution that you could have come up with, but as long as it deals with whatever problem you're actually having, then you will go and you try to prove it, that of course even if it's not the most structured model, but you go ahead and prove that, oh, whatever problem my stakeholder is facing, that problem is solved, or it now impacts them in a lesser way as compared to the opposition. Then you go ahead and take the debate, right? What is now, even you also have to characterize the status quo, right? Not in a certain way that you characterize it by saying, of course, that oh, it's a capitalistic society, it's a very competitive society, and how it's a rat race, and how you suffer because there is so much competition that it's hard to get a job anywhere. But then there are also certain social narratives that exist. There is certain existing behaviors that that is already very fleshed out, that it's already existing, that you don't have to go ahead and prove it, but you have to go ahead and state it if it's relevant to the debate. You have to talk about how maybe uh, rural people are so still conservative minded that when we talk about the fact that this house would support feminist movement in a certain way, and you go ahead and talk about how the root cause essentially is that rural people maybe still believe in the fact that women should not be allowed to go out and work, right? Then you go ahead and propose that oh, we will push for education in rural areas mostly, so that now people essentially are aware that my daughters and etc., they can go ahead and study and they can pursue whatever they want to, right? So this existing behavior that already exists, this patriarchal behavior that already exists, you have to go ahead and state that, and which is why you actually go ahead and try to push that solution or that solvency in a certain way, right? Next slide. Cool. Before I go on to effective characterization, let me just tell you what the solution or the policy statement would look like, right? You go ahead and characterize your policy statement by stating that how you will, even if you as government or as OP have fear to go ahead and say that oh, this is the policy we will be proposing, this is the policy we'll be implementing, you still have to go ahead and say how you will be implementing it, right? Maybe you will implement it through funding education in the rural areas more, or maybe you will go ahead and implement it by funding education in the areas where like back end or lord back economical areas, right? Either areas where there is a lack of money, there is a lack of knowledge, there is lack of awareness, etc., etc. So you go ahead and state that. So that is that you have to go ahead and talk about how you will be implementing it. Again, the how that comes in, right? That's why I said why, what, when, where, how. Then you talk about the benefits, about how exactly is it solving the problem, whatever the root causes are, is it actually getting solved by your policy? How exactly is it getting solved by your policy? Maybe a certain mentality is changing because of more education, maybe more awareness is rising, which means now daughters can go ahead and perhaps try to discuss with their parents more and go ahead and pursue education in the first place. Maybe now mindsets are changing in a certain way because now you're holding more awareness campaigns, etc., etc. And maybe you're changing it, maybe you're holding up awareness campaigns in the way that oh, even daughters can go ahead and earn money now, which will bring inherently more money in the family, which will help out rural families which are already like not that good in the economical factor, right? So you go ahead and state benefits. You go ahead and state the drawbacks. Even if there are certain drawbacks in your solution, you have to go ahead and acknowledge that. You can't go ahead and be like, oh, I don't acknowledge this or this won't happen. You just can't go ahead and assert that in a certain way. Either you explain that oh, this drawback won't happen, or you talk about, you try to mitigate those harms in the way that you basically go ahead and show that even if it's, you try to reduce those harms, whatever harms that are happening, or you go ahead for a comparative analysis, and your second speaker, maybe your third speaker, goes ahead and talks about the fact of how even if there are certain drawbacks with our policy, there are so many more drawbacks and loopholes in the ops policy, or even if they have those drawbacks, how our drawbacks have less error or less less harms as compared to ops harms. Now going for techniques for for effective characterization, right? Talking about vivid language, how you go ahead and essentially paint the world that, for perhaps if we talk about the fact how this house would ban children or something, or would ban parents from having children. So you go ahead and talk about the fact how population is so on the rise, which is again, this is the contextualization, right? You go ahead and talk about how overpopulation is there, and how deforestation is happening due to extreme urban density, high urban density, how there is less jobs and essentially more competition, etc., etc. But then if you essentially go down to the root cause of why parents would ban children, maybe you can talk about the fact how parents feel essentially how children nowadays are becoming so ungrateful to their parents for whatever parents are trying to do, how children are, they're going ahead, and even if parents are investing all of their hard work and efforts and money into that, into their children, the children are just going ahead and moving into a foreign country and living their best life, and they're abandoning their parents, which is more on the rise, right? So you go ahead and talk about that, you paint the world about how parents feel, about how they invest everything that they have into their children, and but the children now abandon them, which essentially now now what do the parents feel now, right? In this case, the parents are the stakeholders, right? And the children are the secondary stakeholder for, the opposition, because now they come ahead and say how when parents are in old age, children go ahead and support their parents, etc., etc. Then the second thing is you make comparisons and analogies. You go ahead and state the fact, if for example you're op and your gov does not paint the best picture for you, maybe gives you very unfair characterization, very uncharitable characterization. What does uncharitable characterization mean, right? It essentially means that they go ahead and paint the world in a very idealistic way, or they go ahead and paint the world in such a way that it's essentially only favoring them, and it's not really fair characterization. It's not very ideal, or it's not very fair to opt, in fact, to even try to go ahead and state their case, because they are, painting the world in such a way that, oh, gov, whatever gov is proposing for is the best. So you go ahead and make comparisons, or you go ahead and recharacterize the case according to you, according to fair facts that exist in the real world. Understand that you can't go ahead and paint very fantasy based facts, right? You can't go ahead and prove that, oh, every parent is so extremely nice and no parents are toxic, and every children goes ahead and tries to, help their parent and be a very nice and, filial child, etc., etc. You can't go ahead and paint that. You have to go ahead by the real facts. You have to go ahead by painting by the fact that family bonds are so inherently real, and how, family is the only thing that's there for you, how social relationships can die out simply because of the power or the money or the position you have in life, but how family is essentially there for you for the rest of your life because you're bound by blood, etc., etc. And how even families incentivize, even if, maybe for example we talk about how, like, families are so cruel to their children in a certain way because they push their child to just go ahead and pursue whatever the parents want instead of what the child wants, right? You as gov can go ahead and push the fact that even if the parents are going ahead and pushing the child for whatever the parents want, it's essentially in the benefit of the child, because even if the parents are selfish and they're greedy and they want their own financial benefit, through that the child is still earning a good amount of money, because that is, they are pushing their child into a financially stable job over a passionate job which might not be the best for them, in the long term. So that's how you make comparisons. Third, very important, you must have consistency with the real world. You cannot go ahead and, again, like I said, you cannot go ahead and, state fantasy facts, etc., 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 etc. You cannot go ahead and talk about how, again, parents are this way or parents are that way. You have to stay extremely real to the situation, to the status quo at hand. You cannot go ahead and paint a very unfavorable favorable picture to any of the sides at hand. And yeah, I guess that's it. If there are any questions as such, I'll actually go ahead and tell you a little bit of how context would look like in emotion and how Karak would look like in emotion, right? So, just again, just something basic, right? It's basically how, maybe, wait, I'll just post it in the chat box for you guys to check. Cool. So as you see, there is a certain info slide that is provided already, that you are a racial minority, etc., etc. You are a well respected member of your community, and you have just witnessed this robbery that was committed by your own minority status. And now this house would choose not to report the crime. An example of an actor policy motion, by the way. So now what happens in this, as gov, right? You go ahead and give the context that, oh, how do minorities work, how, they are very bonded and they are very strong and they are very community based, simply because of the fact that, they face cruelty and they face similar prejudices against them, which builds up their bond, but also because of the fact that they have certain they have similar values and they have been raised in a similar way. They have similar lifestyles, etc., etc., which is why they're able to relate to each other. You can go ahead and give the context that the way that stigma works, right? Again, I told you about it already, how majority like race and all, they go ahead and have that stigma against minority race, and how they have this idea that, oh, minority may be criminals, and how if this person goes ahead and reports this crime, then how this majority people would now go ahead and look at it as a fact that, oh, it's a confirmation that, oh, what we believe was true. Now what would the character be, right? You are essentially well respected in the society. So now what, when you talk about the actor inherently, and you talk about how the actor would feel, how the community is so important to the actor simply because of the fact that the actor, whatever stigma the community faces, the actor inherently faces, because they belong to the same minority, right? So also about the fact that if they do go ahead and report that crime, then how now the community itself would turn its back towards the person. And since they were so well respected, now they don't have the power to make decisions anymore. They are looked down upon in the society. Their family is affected. They're socially outcasted, etc., etc. This is what the characterization is, which essentially brings you to bigger impacts, right? Which essentially brings you to better depth analysis of arguments, because now the impacts come that how when you get isolated from society, and how now your family gets affected, but also maybe how now when you are alienated from the society, but also when you are now, you don't belong to either side, because the majority race still looks down upon you. Just because you're honest and you report one crime doesn't mean they suddenly believe you, right? So when you go ahead and this happens, it's still, it is, you are alienated from both sides of the community. So you go ahead and place impacts on that way. And now I will hand it over to our vice president, Achita. Yeah, thank you guys.
Hello, guys. Before going on to the actor stakeholder analysis, any doubts till now? Understandably, this would be the longest workshop that you would be attending till now. So yeah, there will be doubts. We'll be creeping up. So yup, I guess I'm not visible again. Any doubts, guys? I would randomly call someone. What ex? Okay, wait. What extent? Okay, cool. Characterization is something which again, understand judges are usually someone who has average, who is basically an average intelligent voter, right? Which means there can be two types of characterization that you can provide. That is one of the basic knowledge of how a minority life looks like. Once you probably go and deep dive into a very nuanced characterization of someone would probably look like, which isn't visible to everyone present right now, you have to paint the picture. What does that mean? Which means there is one single minority member who is probably harassed and who is probably having a very bad time. You have to then go and show what is the like condition of that member at that particular time, which means you have to paint the picture of this how this particular person looks like, which means either these are the two types of characterizations you can provide. One which is very basic characterization of which everyone knows, you have to just go and flag out in order to just pull your points. Second, you can just go and paint pictures of things which aren't available openly. uh, did you get it? Prabhakar, cool. Hi, other than that, any other doubts, guys? Three, two, one. Hello, I'll be taking the actor and stakeholder analysis. Why is it even important though? I mean, this. Okay, wow, my just screen blanked off. Oh, wow, never mind. Cool. Sorry, guys. Why is actor and stakeholder analysis even important? These are basically the starting points and ending points of a particular debate. You start with the stakeholder or characterization, the beginning of how actors actually look like, what they would be doing. And at the end of the debate, you simply go and show whether they are even getting benefits or not. Which means these are basically the starting point and the ending point of the particular debate, which means this again becomes very important for you all to go and understand it completely so that you can actually go and structure your speech accordingly, because now you know, now like in the next 10 minutes that I will be speaking, Now you know how to go and start a particular speech, and then how to go and end a particular speech. In mid, again, those are basic debating knowledge that you would we will be having workshop of mechanizations either ways. But again, those are the easier part. I mean, those are the things which you would have done either ways in normal debates or not. Those are reasonings, mechanization points and stuff, right? Which means the analysis of starting and ending becomes essentially important. Okay, next slide. When you talk about actor, these actor. Whenever I'm telling actor, basically means is not a Bollywood actor, of course. Is actor who wants to make a difference, who actually has the capability of taking a particular action. There are two types of actors. One which is probably NPC. One is an active actor. Understand, if you are probably say Michael of GTA 5, who is an actor here, but randomly, when you are a Michael, you are probably Trevor who is going around. I don't know if anybody follows this particular thing, but again, yeah, NPC. Okay, those can be that is still an actor, but that is a part of the stakeholder type, right? Which means now in this particular slide, I will be talking about a decision-taking actor. Which means I have given here what are the motions that actually comes under this specific motions. Like this house believes that X should. X is an actor. This house would. Usually, this is also an actor motion where essentially the actor is a government or a state either ways. Next, this house as X would. Again, whenever you see X, don't remember about your X. This would be an actor in these motions. So this is essentially important that whenever you see X, we are using X here. That is an actor, which means he or she or they or an organization itself, it would be taking some amount of action. The definition literally states here anyone, organization, government that will be taking a decision and implementing via some action. You take a decision, you then go and do that particular action. But again, conditions to be met in order to be an actor. What actually happens is, in few motions you would find it really tough to decide who would be the actor, right? Which means in this household motion, most of the time people think that yeah, government is always the actor, but guys, not really. It can be anyone who will be meeting these two things: A, agency; B, urgency. I know Vichi has already explained it. I will be revising it either ways. What does these two mean? Why is it even important? In which frames are it even important? Which means now when I have multiple players who can be an actor, I have to choose the most proximate or the best actor out of it, so that I can at the end of at the end of the debate, if I probably, for example, if I have to do a mission, I have Michael, Trevor, and Franklin in GTA 5. Now I have to go and choose the actor who can probably meet these two things and probably go and effectively do a particular task. Okay, guys, I'm so sorry I'm taking GTA 5 references, but just understand that you are in a world, you have multiple actors, now you have to choose one particular actor. Then, first is agency. What does agency even mean? Agency means he has the resources and position enough to go forward and do that particular task. What does this mean? For example, if you want to do a huge scale money spending, money subsidizing model or something, where you want to subsidize everything, you can't have one particular personnel as an actor, right? Because simply he does not have that agency. Agency means, for example, again in a game, you have actors, you have to complete a mission. I probably am a poor person who doesn't have gun, who doesn't have money, who doesn't have power, which means I am not the best actor to probably go and do that mission. But on the other end, if some an actor, a random actor who has guns, who has power, who has resources, who can actually take that particular decision, he goes and takes the first part, which is the agency. Cool. That becomes the agency part, which means fine, you're shortlisted as an actor. Congratulations. Secondly, what is urgency that comes to here? Urgency means I want to do it immediately, which means this house would ban cigarettes. One of the favorite motion that I have been using from the last 1 year is like urgency. If say government is an actor here, now you have to give government a particular amount of urgency to do this. For example, you want to kill a particular person, for example, mission, you going, you have the agency, you have all the guns around there, but you do not have any motor to go forward and kill that. Then would you be an actor? No. In order for you to go and be an actor, you have to either have a very immediate problem that you have in your life, you want to go and go and get rid of it and do this particular action, or you get some amount of monetary benefit after doing this particular action, which means I have this urgency to particularly do this particular action, which means I have taken a agency, b urgency to be a particular actor, which means now I can take the decision. I have money, I have resources, I have power to go and implement that particular decision. Secondly, I have an urgency, I have a reason for which I would be doing it. That becomes that I am qualified as an actor. Before going to the next slide, any doubts on actor, guys? Any doubts? Yes, Ojas.
I'm typing it भैया रूम में थोड़ा हल्ला है
Okay, cool. Other than that, any other doubts, guys? You can just verbalize your doubts. I'll just make sure in the next 10 to 15 minutes of me yapping, somehow you understand whatever is going on. Yeah. Ojas is typing. I'm waiting for Ojas. Ojas. Till then, any others? Any others? Cool. Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. That you need to go and take the both things, which means even that's what my example was. Even if I have so many guns, even if I have so much of power, so much of money, if I don't have a reason to kill someone, why would I even kill? Which means in order to kill someone, I should also have the hatred in me. I should have so many problems in my life that I have to get rid of. Or secondly, somebody is paying me. I'm getting some amount of benefit after doing that action. Only then I can probably go and do a particular action and be an actor. Okay, cool. I assume there are no other doubts. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, now here comes an actor, which means when I have now done a particular action, cool, now how would I even be evaluated? It's essentially important, which means I am probably China now. I'm already ready to go forward and kill, like bomb Vietnam. I am Donald Trump who would probably bomb Iran tomorrow because again the market is closing today evening, and I'm sure something would be happening in Iran soon. But again, uh, what will be there on premise? How analysis is done? What is analysis? Analysis basically means even though if I'm going and if even if I'm the actor, whether I'm doing the correct thing, is that action even benefiting me? Will that action give me a good amount of return of investment? There are two things here: capacity of making a change, how much resources you have, and how much change you can make. What does this mean? Example: Sri Lanka is an actor. Sri Lanka hates India. Let's assume. Let's assume. Sri Lanka hates India. Sri Lanka has weapons. Sri Lanka has reason. Sri Lanka is an actor. But how much amount of capacity, how much amount of change it can make? In a debate, you can't go and simply assume that Sri Lanka would probably go and bomb the entire India and India would be in shambles tomorrow, because simply that do not follow the first rule of premise here is the capacity of making a change, which means even if I have certain amount of resources, even if I have a good amount of urgency, what to what extent can an actor actually make a difference? Which means you have to show to what extent. If I am India, if I'm a government and I'm probably going and banning cigarettes tomorrow, does that mean that tomorrow randomly all the cigarettes would go and evaporate from the society? To what extent can I actually make that particular action plausible is something which has to be dependent on, which means I have to prove that yeah, to this extent I can probably do this, even if I don't reach the end goal or the perfect stage, still that is a good thing. Or simply the opposition can simply say, even if you're just going and ruining your entire amount of resources, that's not benefiting on you at any point, because simply that's not solving anything. Secondly, requirement of making a change. Sometimes what you do is, in order to take an action, we assume that the action will be taken right now. This house, as China would invade India, China would be invading India very, very soon, probably some amount of planning. We would never debate that China would be invading India after 5 years from now. Which means now you have to also show whether this urgency which is like killing you, which is poking you from your back, is that important to probably then go and take this particular action. Because again, sometimes what happens is I'm already happy with my own life. Even like if the actor and the China, I'm like great, I do not have any requirement. Just because I have the craving of invading India, that doesn't mean I would be like invading India, right? Which means the requirement of making a change is that even an immediate urgency? Because these are usually which the opposition tries to push on you and say, no, see, you don't have to do all of this. You're already good. Why the fuck you are trying to do all this? But again, these are the premise. These are the analysis you can do. Secondly, on the impacts. Now I'm taking slowly to the end part of the debate of how you would be going. Then you have to prove impacts and return of investment. What does impacts mean? Impacts basically means I have taken that action. Now, whether whatever outcomes of that action are there, whether they are good or bad, now I will be analyzing about that particular action or particular impact. Impacts, usual weighing metric is proximity or importance, right? What does that mean? I am China. Cool. I am China. This is the motion that I have used. This also as China would invade India. I don't give a fuck about what other countries think. I want to invade India tomorrow. But then, what impacts that it would be having? Which means proximately for me, what is more important? I need more land. I need connectivity to the Bay of Bengal somehow. I need proper direct connectivity through the Indian Ocean so that I can probably go and increase my trade. Which means these are the direct impacts, the direct benefits you would be getting. These are the things which will be affecting me directly. This usually the government side runs because these are very easy to prove, by the way. Which means because again, this is an actor motion, guys. I don't give a fuck about what India is suffering right now. If I am China, guys, I am China right now. Assume. Cool. These are the direct impacts, which means getting more land, getting direct benefits towards me, getting more money, getting more trade. These are the direct impacts or direct metric that are proximity. What is indirect impacts that have been indirectly affecting me? China attacking India, India pulling geopolitical pressure, other countries pressurizing China. What does this mean? I go and probably invade India, bomb India, and probably now India is suffering. I don't give a fuck about India suffering, but the thing that it will be directly affecting is now India would probably go and pull ties or probably make an issue in UN. Probably it will suddenly summon few of its allies and probably they can give tariffs on me or probably start a war against me. Those are negatives. These are indirect impacts that would be happening, which means China as a China, directly I'm probably getting some amount of money, but indirectly I'm already into this particular trouble. Which means these are the type of impacts that then you can go and analyze because these are two types. Like for an actor, how this affect me directly and indirectly. Secondly, return of investment. Understand to the extent to which you are see actor is taking actor taking actions using resources and they are getting that output. If I'm China, if I probably go and given all of my like warfares and give every of my resources to go and simply I just what I received is a certain part of Arunachal Pradesh. I'm still not getting any access to Bangladesh or direct the Bay of Bengal anyways. Whether that's even like affecting me directly, whether the return of investment is good or whether it's like whether it's viable or whether it's in the interest of me to go forward and do this particular thing. These are the type of analysis that you can actually run in this particular actor frame. This slide, any doubts? Anyone? Anyone? Can I get a thumbs up from everyone in the group? Okay, okay, okay. Cool. All right. Okay, cool. Nice question. Do we assume that all actors act rationally? Usually, whenever you're doing a particular debate, you are an actor, which means this becomes frame in two different motions. Again, going on to the nuance. Rational thing would go on two frames and direct actor motion. Yes, I am rational because I am the actor. I assume that I am rational. I mean, Rajat Mukherjee is rational enough to take good decisions for the particular actor because probably Rajat Mukherjee is China right now. But again, I am rational. I hopefully I'm debating that. Secondly, this house believes that X should do so, which means this house believes that North Korea should go and invade South Korea. Very simple. Now, when I don't have that ability to make particular policies, when I am not the actor, Rajat Mukherjee is not an actor. Rajat Mukherjee is believing that North Korea should invade South Korea, which means I don't know how North Korea would be acting. North Korea's decision making is not in my hands, which means now I can simply go and say North Korea can be irrational and probably then out of their hatred they can possibly do such and such flaws, because I would be checking it from a different perspective of how actors would be doing. But again, in order to prove the irrationality of the actor, you have to again prove something called as the like you have to again characterize on what state that particular actor is. This house actor could be probably suicidal, right? In suicidal, which means depression becomes like a particular individual actor. Depression becomes something which actually pulls this particular actor to take things irrationally, which means you have to think from the perspective of an actor and the mental capacity or the emotional bandwidth that it has at that point of time, and only then you have to show of which to which extent of rationality with that particular actor can actually go and perform. This again becomes a thing on like minorities, people who are filled with hatred, people whose urgency are so weirdly divided that their probably principal negativity or principal hatred comes over the normal pragmatics or rational in the very first place. That again becomes a scope of debate. Then you have to go and prove why this particular actor would be rational, give reasons why the particular actor is likely to be irrational, give reasons. You can prove that on analysis of what is the present state of an actor and probably then how it would be doing steps accordingly. Mental state, physical state, whether he is in depression. These all again comes under this thing. Cool. Any doubts? I mean, did it, I answer your question, Pushpa? Pushpa. Cool, perfect. I have spent good amount of time stakeholder analysis, three strikes again and again. What is a stakeholder? People who directly, indirectly get affected due to a motion. Okay, cool. Which means whatever action, not every motion is an actor motion, right? Which means there are motion, but in every motion there will be stakeholders. Stakeholders are group of people, group of organization, anything, principles, pragmatic, anything which directly or indirectly gets affected due to this particular motion. What does this motion state? This house would ban homeworks. Wonderful. Direct stakeholder is students. Very simple. Yeah, I don't have to do homework. I'm probably winning my life. I'm probably enjoying my life, whatever I am. I am the direct stakeholder because this particular action is actually directly affecting me. Second, indirect stakeholders, teachers or education system. Teachers general would probably have to give more pressure because simply the students aren't practicing anymore, means which means I have to put in extra efforts. Thirdly, frame on which this particular debate would be working on this society, impact on the biggest scale, which means now this particular student is going forward and becoming a member of the society and has to vote or something and probably would bring a random bad uh, politicians into power, which means this frame becomes a final state, which means society most of the time society becomes a stakeholder anyways, because simply whatever actor which is present in this particular in any particular motion goes and simply goes and stays into this society, right? Which means these are stakeholder. What is a stakeholder analysis? Analyzing the net positives and net negatives caused to the stakeholder due to a particular action or a motion, which means at the end stakeholders can be, as I proved to you, like there are students, there are teachers, there are society who are the stakeholders here. At the end of the what like analysis basically means you have to show how this particular action that you are taking in this particular motion is whether it's like positively or negatively affecting the stakeholder. If it's negatively affecting the stakeholder, sorry guys, goodbye, you are losing that particular debate if you are trying to defend it. But if you are able to prove that you are positively affecting the stakeholder, you would be winning the debate, right? Again, then, end goal of the debate, proves the comparative greater net positive outcome of the stakeholder in a paradigm. What does this mean? Sometimes on both sides of the paradigm, which is government side and opposition side, the stakeholders can be benefiting, right? Probably in my side, probably students are getting some amount of benefit. In their side, the students are getting some amount of benefit. But again, you have to go simply and go and weighing again. This would be a completely different workshop later on. Weighing basically means you are. It's like basically weighing means two things. You have to show which one is greater. Whether A is you have A and B as numbers, both are positive numbers, which means both are having positive benefits. Then what is weighing? You have to prove which whether A in A or B which one is bigger, which was the bigger number, which is the better number. When A is 5, B is 3, I'm showing why A is greater than B, which means the goods in paradigm A is more than the goods in paradigm B, which means the benefits. This is called weighing. Weighing is simply showing which one is better, which one, again, metrics are used. But for now, you can actually understand the benefits are on both sides. I'm just going and proving which side the benefits is more. That's it, simple. Next slide. The next Q&A, the next, I'll ask questions once I end these two slides. Again, that is it. Okay. Types of impacts on the stakeholders. Okay. There are two types of impacts that actually goes. The first type is principal impacts. Principal impacts means there are two type of things. You are an actor. If you're saying you are a human being, what actually works? Principle basically what affects you on a principal level, like your faith, your devotion, your emotions, your sense of fulfillment, your happiness. It can be anything which is not quantitative, which basically means I might be crying with a $10 million in my bank account, but whether it's actually going and affecting me in a positive way, whether if I'm that happy, which means sometimes principle goes over pragmatics. What is pragmatics again? Pragmatic impacts are basically direct quantitative benefits that you get. It can be money, wealth, it can be luxury, it can be anything that you could be getting in a quantitative basis. Now, I have given you an example of where pragmatics or how does pragmatics and principles work. This horse prefers happiness. Okay, cool. Have I not given? Oh, even next slide दिखाना. अनन्या next slide दिखाना एक बार.
Hey, is it not visible? Few important note points.
Okay, cool. Next वाले part में था. ठीक है, go back. मैं example का ये भूल गया था. Go back to the previous वाला. It's lagging, I guess. Yeah. It's still not visible. Yeah, cool. Perfect. Example. This horse prefers happiness with low income legal job over richness or wealth way from illegal jobs. Which means this becomes a direct principle versus pragmatic analysis. Which means happiness with low income legal job. Which means this becomes principally. This can be sense of fulfillment that yeah, I'm happy. This can be sense of fulfillment. Yeah, I'm not doing any illegal job. I'm probably working in the correct way possible. This is principal impacts over your wealth from illegal jobs. Yes, I'm getting a lot of money, but I'm taking principles as my like trade-off, which means that money is coming as a trade-off with happiness. These things are basically principle versus pragmatic debates. Again, how to weigh those things comes into the next slide. Ananya, last slide. Cool. Okay. Few important points again. This will be mentioned here. Always try to weigh then rebut on impacts of principles versus pragmatics metrics of importance. What does this mean? What does rebutting and weighing mean? Let me just give you a small note. Rebutting means trying to prove why the side B is non-existent, which means say there are two sides. Government is pushing A as their benefit, opposition is pushing B as their benefit. Now, rebutting basically means going and outrightly proving why, as A, that B doesn't exist or B is not of that era, is B is shit or something. That is like whipping or rebutting. What is weighing? Weighing means I won't spend my time to prove why B won't never happen or B is zero. I would simply go and say my A is better than B. This becomes a thing, which means either in order to win against your opponents, you can take two things. You can do two things. Either A, you just show that their case is non-existent, whatever they try to prove are zero. Our points are the things that actually goes and stands there. Or B, you simply say that no, my points are better than their points. I acknowledge that their side can have such certain benefits, but my side actually goes and prevails or has more benefit. Example. A pure priest would prefer principle over pragmatics if the wealth has religion as trade-off. Wording, sorry. What does this mean? A priest who is actually very morally obliged to their religion would probably go and prefer principle over pragmatics if the pragmatics of the wealth would probably come with a trade-off of money or trade-off of principles, which means you're a priest, you have to probably then go and stop, you have to convert into atheist to probably then go and get $100,000 or something. But again, on this particular metric it becomes completely different, because for that particular priest, this on like metrics of importance, what is important to me, my principles are important to me, which means that becomes a point. This is a weighing. Second example which is shown here, a capitalist businessman would prefer pragmatics over principles if the principles have utility as trade-off. What does this mean? Like, I am a capitalist businessman. I know only one thing, that is money. I need money. I don't give a fuck about my principles. I don't give a fuck about my whatever things around me, my principles, my faith or dignity, whatever. I just need money, and only that can probably give me happiness or fulfillment at any point. Which means this becomes that no, for in this particular frame, like this pragmatics would weigh over principles, because again, importance. What an actor. Priest is an actor, capitalist businessman is an actor. What are the things which is important to him? That's how the things would be rotating. Last, this house prefers a world works majorly on principles than pragmatics. How does this thing work? I would be really happy if somebody could like raise their hand and explain what are the burdens of this house prefers a world motion. Anyone, guys? Anyone? Free diet coke or free coke to whoever says this. Cool. Oh, I'm just saving money, I guess, at this point. Never mind. This house prefers a world motion basically means that you comparing between two different worlds, right? World A, world B. What is pragmatic difference? World A, a person in world A has 5 lakh rupees. A person in world B has 1 lakh rupees. Does this mean the person in world A is better than the person in world B? Not really, because this fulfillment of pragmatics is very comparative or subjective, which means I have 5 lakhs. I see people who have 1 crore, which means I'm not happy with that 5 lakhs. In one paradigm, probably that person with 1 lakhs is seeing everyone with 1 lakhs only, which means none of these people know what the other world person looks like, right? Which means what is more important, whether I'm fulfilled, whether I'm happy with that particular like thing, right? Which means I'm fulfilled. That becomes a principal push, because simply I don't care about, I don't know what the other world looks like, right? The actors in other world looks like. That's why again, whenever we debate on principle or in this house prefers a world motion, we'll be discussing how principle actually weighs over pragmatics. Cool, that's the end from my side. Before going on to the adjudication part, any questions, guys? Anyone? All clear, all clear. Need a thumbs up from everyone. Cool, I can assume that things are clear. Ananya, okay, with that we will be getting into adjudication, guys. This is a great thing. Till now we were discussing about debating. In adjudication, few of this knowledge are required. But Ananya, with four adjudication breaks, would be coming here to explain you of how this particular thing works, and she would be giving her knowledge. Guys, please go and focus this, because simply, if not a good debater, you can probably go and be a great edge and have the same amount of importance. With that, Ananya,
Hi, am I audible?
loud and clear.
Alright, great. Hi everyone, I'm Ananya. I'll be briefing APD adjudication to you. Now, this is important for all people who are going to go as adjudicators, of course, but this is also really important for the debaters here, people who are going ahead, who are going to go ahead and debate. Why? Because you need to understand what is the perspective of adjudicators when they're judging you. When you understand that, when you're able to analyze, when you're able to recognize what your judge actually wants from you, you can go ahead and have a very, very fruitful debate. So please pay attention. This is slightly technical. So I have made the slides a little content heavy, but that's just better for your revision. So yeah, let us start. All right. Firstly, the basic requirement for you to be an adjudicator is to be an ordinary intelligent voter. What does an ordinary intelligent voter look like, right? An ordinary intelligent voter is, expected to have read all international news, but not technicalities. What this then means is that the knowledge of this ordinary intelligent voter is broad but not deep. So this person will probably know all well-known facts about the world, will probably know all the sensational news that's going around in today's time, will know about all the facts and figures that a normal person should, a normal, intelligent, well-aware person should. But they would not know the very technicalities of these subjects. They would not know, the a lot of reasonings, a lot of specifications of topics. So their knowledge is mostly broad but not deep. However, this does not mean that debaters cannot use specialized knowledge. This person is very, very intelligent and thus can be convinced based on your convincing power, based on your convincing skills. And this person can be convinced if you analyze and if you actually go ahead and mechanize your arguments in a proper way. If you're able to state your arguments along with the proper mechanization that is required, this person will go ahead and accept your claims. Unless you do that, if you just go ahead and just state a very technical sentence, this person will not be able to credit that. Here is a list of things that you need to keep in mind for an ordinary intelligent voter. So, this ordinary intelligent voter is supposed to be aware of basic facts about the world, right? For example, that India is in South Asia, for example. This person should be aware of international headlines that have been in the news for a sustained period of time. For example, let's say US canceling visas and US actually going ahead and banning visas, right? This person should avoid utilizing personal knowledge, because even if this judge is very, very knowledgeable, even if this judge has a lot of technical knowledge, when this person becomes an adjudicator in a round in an Asian parliamentary debate, this person should go ahead and listen to the debate as a person with ordinary intelligence, should not put in their biases or put in their expertise in the ambit of the debate, right? This person should also not have any sort of emotional biases to the arguments. This person should not be very biased about, maybe the very essence of the debate, the very essence of the debate, right? This person should not be, of course, biased about any geographical, cultural, national, ethnic, or any other background. This person should actually be very, very unbiased and very open minded about argumentation styles and styles of speaking, so that this person can go ahead and actually, listen to the debate in a very unbiased manner. So, TLDR, this person should be extremely, extremely unbiased. You have to start from a base level wherein you are a well informed person, but you do not have the specific knowledge about stuff. Now, there are certain metrics on which an adjudicator judges you, right? Firstly, there's persuasiveness and consistency. Now, what does that mean? Judges naturally judge debates by assessing which team is more persuasive, right? What does that mean? Your arguments should be well structured. For example, they should be persuasive. They should, have clear definitions, etc., which goes ahead and makes the judge actually realize that yes, you actually know a lot about this subject. You understand what you're argumenting about, and you're not just going ahead and stating sentences. Just a second. So sorry. One second. Hi, very sorry about that. Yeah, so I was saying the persuasiveness of an argument, right, is rooted in the plausible reasons that are offered and are proved to be true and important. What this means that your analysis of the argument is very, very important. If you don't analyze your arguments perfectly, then this judge will not credit your arguments, right? Uh, Other than that, there is also clarity and rhetorical power with which these arguments are persuaded with. So what that means is that your analysis should be very, very clear. You should have the rhetorical power to go ahead and actually convince the adjudicator that what you're saying holds relevance within the ambit of this debate. Uh, Next is consistency, right? What does consistency mean to layman? Suppose your first speaker makes a claim X. Now you, as the second speaker, cannot go ahead and make a claim Y that is mutually exclusive to the claim X. What that means is that suppose uh, my first speaker says something, and then my second speaker says something that is completely different or completely different from what my first speaker has said. This counts to inconsistency. Now, this is firstly just garbage for the entire debate, right? Because you cannot go ahead and go with two completely unparalleled, completely different claims, but it is also unfair to the second team to have to interact with two completely different lines of argument, right? So what then that means that you should not be contradicting your previous speakers or yourselves in any of their speeches. uh, Now, a contradiction is not something that a person is just goes ahead and misspeaks or does not, mechanize enough. This is done so that people who accidentally speak something or unknowingly go ahead and speak something, they are not penalized for the same. But if you actually go ahead and contradict, then the other team has to credit only the first claim that you made and not the next claim that you made. Even the judge judges the debate as normal, but it does not. But they do not account for. They do not actually consider your second claim. They only consider your first claim. And if the opposing team has the right to go ahead and point out your contradiction, if they point out the contradiction, you are discredited, and the opposition is or the opposing team is credited. But as long as the opposing team does not point it out, it is not something that the judge credits or discredits either of the teams for. So again, if in a nutshell, what this then means is that you need to be really, really consistent with your case. You need to align with whatever claims that you're making or whatever claims your teammates are making. Now, burden fulfillment. I think a lot of this has been covered by when we were doing motion types and motion breakdown, right, in the last session. But again, what are burdens? These are basically the core issues that need to be talked about by both the benches, right? And every motion has certain burdens attached to it. Like we discussed in the last workshop, that when it is a policy motion, the core burden of a policy motion is for the government to propose a policy, and for the opposition to, if required, propose a counter policy. So every motion has an implicit burden that can be attached to the motion itself, or a burden can also be set by the analysis that is provided by the speakers. And in either of the cases, burdens must be fulfilled for the arguments to remain irrelevant. So consider this: even if you're very persuasive with your statements, even when you're very persuasive with your argumentation, if that argumentation is not relevant to the debate, then you will simply not be credited. What then that means is that you need to actually address the core issues of the debate. You need to actually address what is actually important in that debate. If you do not address that, if you're trying to persuade your adjudicator into something that is not even relevant to the debate, then you simply won't be credited. Now, definitions. Definitions are also a very important accounting factor that actually goes ahead and decides your debate, right? Now, definitions, what do they mean? Now, it is also it has also been discussed in speaker rules. When we talk about the first speakers, they are supposed to go ahead and define the actual motion to all of the people, define all of the keywords that come into it, to actually go ahead and set up an understanding for the debate, to go ahead and set up words for this debate. What that helps with is that what is your platform that you'll be debating on. You are very clear of the ideas that the government has of the motion and the opposition has of the motion, which then that me which that then means is that you are very very clear of both of the perspective with which either of the teams are looking at to the motion. And that actually goes ahead and helps you with when you're trying to analyze the debate, so that you know that both the teams are on the same page, right? When you do not know how the other team is comprehending the motion, it becomes inherently difficult for you to go ahead and maybe interact with them. So the government is supposed to clearly define the motion, mention the stakeholders, which is again a part of characterization and the stakeholder analysis that was already discussed. But these things are really really important, and that's why this was covered before we came to adjudication, right? Because if you do not go ahead and contextualize, if you don't go ahead and characterize, if you do not put down a stakeholder analysis, your debates and arguments become less relevant and less persuasive. When you're able to successfully define all these things, you can actually go ahead and stay relevant in this debate. Now, as also already discussed, in policy motions, the teams are supposed to come up with a policy, and not just a policy, you need to go ahead and actually mechanize these policies. So, if you provide a functional mechanization for the policy, then that actually accounts as a successful policy proposal. If you do not, if you just go ahead and tell me that this thing will be done, and this is how this will be done, without telling me this is how that thing will be done, then I cannot understand, because I am an average intelligent voter. So I would not understand how that policy is going to lead to overall betterment of the society in general, or anything that you're trying to defend. So it is very important for you to go ahead and actually mechanize the topics, and that actually leads to a more successful debate. Now, it is also illegitimate for teams to narrow down definitions, right? What does that mean? Now, suppose the government starts with the debate, right? Now, they narrow down the definition to one exclusive facade of the entire debate. For example, I can say this house would ban cigarettes, Rajat Bhaiya's favorite motion. But then government tells me that this house would ban cigarettes only in urban areas, because or maybe only in rural areas, because there's less awareness in rural areas. That is actually narrowing down the definition, and that is actually very very uncharitable for the opposition to for them to have to actually argument simply on the very narrowed down definition that you gave. So teams can go ahead and actually challenge your definitions, if you ever do so, by simply proving how that is very very uncharitable. Uh, Also, teams cannot define the motion based on what they understand, simply if it is not intuitively interpretable from the motion. What that means is that you cannot take out cases or analyze it in a very nuanced way that is not very apparent when you read the motion. That is again something that accounts as uncharitable. Now, opposing the government's case, I think we all understand that the opposition has to oppose the government's case, right? Now, how is this done? Is firstly, if it is a policy motion, then the government when the government proposes a policy, the opposition may propose a counter proposition or a counter policy to defend comparatively better outcomes. And this is done when the opposition chooses to not commit to the course of action of the government's policy. They may also choose to not propose a counter proposition, and then they will have to just defend status quo to the policy that they're implementing. But if they provide a counter proposition, right, then they have to debate on whether the policy by the government is correct, or is more beneficial for the potential benefits that we are taking out from this debate, or the counter proposition is more beneficial. So inherently what happens is that when there is a counter proposition, you have to debate whether the policy by the government is better, or the counter proposition proposed by the opposition is better. If there is no counter proposition, you have to compare the model of the government with the status quo, and the opposition has to prove how the status quo is better off without the policy. Now, weighing is very, very important in adjudication, right? And also because when you're giving your reply speeches, as I already mentioned, that reply speeches are biased adjudications, right? So in that, weighing plays a very important role. So when you're actually able to prove to me that the core issues or the core burdens, the major burdens of the entire debate have been fulfilled by one team better than the other team, then you're actually weighing things out. When you're actually able to prove to me that the major issues that were discussed in the debate are being, maybe better, the criteria that were discussed are maybe being fulfilled better by one team than the other, then that one team simply wins the debate. But what does weighing mean when you're an adjudicator, right? So basically, as I think it's very intuitive that you can understand that judges adjudicate a debate based on a certain criteria, that certain criteria may be recognized by the debaters in general. When you provide a stakeholder analysis or when you characterize the entire thing, then you can go ahead and explicitly derive that this is the very criteria that we need to fulfill to go ahead and actually win this debate. In natural circumstances, I think both the teams agree on the very core issue that needs to be addressed, or the very criteria that needs to be met to go ahead and actually prove that your side is better. Even if they do not, there is if one team is able to prove to me why one criteria is very, very important, then I can again consider it as a major criteria. Other than that, if this is something that does not happen by either of the teams, no team is able to recognize an important criteria that the debate must be judged on, the judge, as an ordinary intelligent voter, may consider a criteria that is important, that might be important to an ordinary intelligent voter, and then go ahead and decide what the result of this debate needs to be, right? Now, the criteria is usually explicitly or implicitly mentioned within the debate, right? And when a criteria comes again and again in a debate, when that topic is being discussed upon, and when both the teams are trying to prove that that criteria is being met successfully by their team, then that accounts as major clash. Simple understanding for major clashes: when you observe that both the parties are debating on one particular topic and are not diverting from it, are trying to take the topic on their side, or trying to take the criteria on their side, that accounts as major clash. On the contrary, sorry, on the contrary, when a criteria is recognized very feebly, or is argued upon very few times, or is not even argued upon substantially, it accounts as minor clash. Now, I think it's very apparent that a major clash accounts to more heavily to the decidability of the debate than a minor one. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's how you weigh, right? When there's a team that is meeting the major clashes, when there's a team that is winning more of the major clashes than a team that's not winning a lot of the major clashes, that team automatically wins, because when you weigh the impacts, when you weigh the benefits of either of the teams, then the teams which have better benefits on the criteria that have been deemed to be very, very important to the debate, they simply win. Now, arguments that do not fit this criteria, right, are still not to be discarded. They are just considered less persuasive, but in case of very close debates, they can take to be the deciding factors. Now, judging an Asian parliamentary debate. Now, what does a judge usually consider, right? All the things that I talked about right till now were the things that judges basically consider while judging an Asian parliamentary debate. Before I proceed further, I would actually like to ask for any clarifications that are required. If you have any questions, feel free to ask on any criteria that judges account. Three, two, one. Okay, assuming none. Great. When you're judging an Asian parliamentary debate, right, judges account for definitions, world building, characterization, stakeholder analysis, mechanization of arguments, etc., etc. But other than that, judges also note the level of engagement, inclusive of POIs that are offered and accepted. This is why we talked about POIs in our very first workshop, because POIs are very, very important to actually go ahead and intersect with and interact with the other team, right? If both the teams run their own cases and do not interact in the form of POIs or any form of argumentation, rebuttals, etc., etc., the debate is not as fruitful. Understand that when one team is running one particular case and the other team is running another particular case, and both the teams do not actually interact in terms of one argument, line of argumentation is better than the other line of argumentation, then that is not a very fruitful debate, of course. Now, judges also perform a motion breakdown to analyze whether all nuances of the motion have been acknowledged. I think this is very, very important when you're judging an APD, that you yourself understand the motion very, very clearly. What I do while I prepare for my oral adjudication, which I'll be discussing later, is that I go through the motion very thoroughly. Now, oftentimes, what happens is that during the prep time rush, teams often, skip some technical terms that might be very, very relevant to the debate. So there are certain dimensions of the motion that may have been ignored by the teams, but can actually decide the winner of the debate, right? For example, recently I was judging a debate and it was set in a liberal economy, but neither of the teams addressed the fact that in their world, the liberal economy will be sustained, or the fact that the liberal economy should not be sustained, or something like that. So, if you're actually able to prove to me that a liberal economy will be sustained through your line of argumentation, then that is something that I can credit, because you are actually focusing on a dimension of the debate that the opposition did not. But when you do not address certain nuances or certain dimensions of the debate, it is mentioned to you by the judge when they perform when they provide their oral adjudication, right? So it is very important for debaters to go through the motion thoroughly, to analyze all dimensions of the motion thoroughly, and also for the judges to analyze whether all dimensions of the motion have been addressed, whether all of them have been acknowledged by the debaters. Lastly, judges perform a clash analysis on major and minor clashes, that is the weighing that I talked about, right? Judges basically weigh the arguments that were provided and the argumentation behind it, which is the mechanization of those arguments, to decide which side is more successful in addressing to the major criterion on which the debate is based on, right? They weigh all the major and minor arguments or clashes, and naturally the team that wins that wins most of the major clashes goes ahead and wins the debate. Now, this is exclusive to adjudicators only. So, judges may be, firstly, there are two kinds of judges. They may be voting or non voting. So, voting are chair and panelists. Chair and panelists are basically people who have a say in what the final outcome of the round will be, and non voting are trainees. So basically, when you start with your adjudication career, then you will be a trainee firstly, and if you're able to do well, then you are actually scored well, and then you get promoted to a panelist or a chair. Now, after the end of the government reply speech, which is the last reply speech, right? So after that gets over, each judge gets 10 minutes to independently deliberate on their decision and submit their ballots. Now, what does independently deliberate mean? Is that you do not consult with any of the other judges on what your call needs to be. There should be absolutely no deliberation among two judges. You independently assess whatever lines of argumentation there were and then submit your ballots. Now, these ballots are only submitted by chair and panelists, as I already mentioned. Now, what does this ballot consist of, right? This ballot consists of your verdict and your individual speaker scores. Now, the verdict is whether government takes the debate or the opposition takes the debate. And the constructive speeches, or the first three speeches, right? That's PM or LO, DPM or DLO, government whip, opposition whip, are scored on a scale of 67 to 83. We'll also be sharing you the scoring guide, which helps you actually score speakers and adjudicators well. But for now, just consider that 67 is the worst a person can possibly get, and 83 is the best speech that a person can possibly give. And the reply speeches are just the simple half of it. So that's 33.5 and 41.5. 33.5 being the lowest and 41.5 being the highest. Now, it is very important that you ensure that the team with a higher total speaker score is the winning team, because oftentimes what happens is that when you independently score speakers, then there might be some sort of discrepancy between your verdict and your aggregate speaker score. So just ensure that. Yeah. And after I told you that 10 minutes are given after the government reply speech, right? So after 10 minutes, the chair announces the house call to the room. House call is basically whether all judges agree on one particular verdict, or there is a split, there is a dissentee, there is a judge who thinks that one team should win while the others think that the other team should win. So once the house call is announced to the room, the oral adjudication starts. Now, when there is a unanimous house call, the default order is that the trainees go first, depending on their order of names on TabiCat, followed by panelists, and then the chair goes last, right? Now, in the case of a split, when there is a dissentee, when there is a dissenting judge, the dissenting judge goes immediately after the chair announces the split, followed by the default order. Now, your oral adjudication, or your OA, should last a maximum of 7 to 10 minutes. And the judges who have not yet delivered their OA should not hear the OAs of other judges to, preserve the nuances that they're going to address, and, just be unbiased. Now, in APDs, all judges are expected to give an OA regardless of their designation, that is chair, panelist, trainee. So note that trainees do not go ahead and submit a ballot, but trainees give you an oral adjudication based on which they are scored on a scale of 0 to 10, and then they're promoted to panelist, or panelist or chair if they're really, really good. Now, NOI depends usually on the adjudicator. It depends on whether what what perspectives they think that need to be addressed while they're actually explaining their verdict. But what NOA accounts is the simple reasons for which a judge voted for a team. So that is inclusive of general comments, burden fulfillment, clash analysis, etc. What I do, because when I started initially, I was very, very confused as in what I should be speaking about in my OA. So what I do are general comments, whether all burdens were fulfilled, what level of engagement was there, was there a dimension of the motion that was not addressed in motion breakdown, and finally clash analysis. And in the end of your OA, it is good practice to ask for any questions and be confident enough to be able to answer to any of them, because you need to go ahead and actually at the end of the day you need to convince the teams, that is the winning team and the losing team, why they're losing or winning. So that might come with some questions of the losing team preferably, so you should be confident in going ahead and actually answering them. Yeah, and once your a judge's OA is done, teams score them on the basis of a judge's scale, which is 0 to 10, with 0 being the worst possible judge with no reasoning pathetic decision, etc., etc., along with qualitative feedback, right? Like what you liked or what you did not like in that particular OA. And while you're doing this, you have to keep all your grudges, all your biases aside, even if you're the losing team. If the judge is actually able to explain to you why you lost with perfect reasoning, you should give them a high judge score, because that then decides who becomes your chair, who becomes your panelist. And when breaks essentially happen, when those judges also break, and then they judge your, eliminatory rounds, or the out rounds or eliminatory rounds. So it is very important that when you come across a good judge, you give them a good speaker, a good judge score, which then leads to a better competition overall. Yeah, that's it for this workshop. Thank you so much for sticking by. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, I'm assuming there are no questions. While I was discussing weighing, I think someone reacted the thinking emoji. So if you have a doubt, please ask. Okay, assuming there are no doubts, Rajat Bhaiya, can we close for today?
Yeah, yeah, that's the end of the official part again. And then if you guys have any doubts, you can stay back. And apart from that, I guess we can go proceed with like, the ending of this recording. There was a gender recording, that's it. And yeah, that's it. That's it for today's workshop.